A luxury gift bag sat in the middle of the boardroom's table. Cream paper, gold ribbon, white tissue folded so perfectly it looked like someone's birthday. Victoria almost smiled. She honestly thought the meeting had ended better than she'd expected. Her elder brother slid the bag towards her.
We just wanted to say thank you.
His wife nodded warmly.
You've given this family so much.
The youngest brother added,
You deserve to enjoy life now.
Victoria whispered, Thank you. She untied the ribbon, lifted the tissue paper, and the smile disappeared from her face. Inside was a framed family photograph, an appreciation plaque, and an envelope. She opened it. Just one page was enough. The board of directors had voted unanimously. Effective immediately, her position no longer existed. 22 years gone. Not because she'd failed, not because she'd stolen, not because she'd made a mistake, simply because the people she loved had decided they no longer needed her. No one raised their voice, no one argued. The room was so quiet, the sound of her folding the letter seemed louder than anyone breathing. Her brother finally spoke.
You've done enough, Victoria. It's time you rested.
Victoria looked at him, then at the gift bag, then back at the family photograph. She smiled, not because she was happy, but because she suddenly understood something they didn't. She stood, picked up the gift bag, thanked every person in the room, and quietly walked away. None of them tried to stop her, because every one of them believed they had just removed the woman from the business. They had no idea what they had actually removed. Welcome to Payoff Stories, where every sacrifice finds its reward. Today's story is about a woman who spent decades quietly building a family business, only to be told her loyalty had become a burden. What her family mistook for the end of her story became the foundation of a far greater one. The strange thing was, it wasn't the dismissal that stayed with Victoria. It was the gift bag. Long after the boardroom door had closed, long after the security guard politely carried the small cardboard box containing her personal belongings to her car, she kept staring at the gold ribbon tied around the paper handles. Someone spent time making betrayal look beautiful. Someone chose expensive wrapping paper for severance documents. She drove away without starting the radio, without making a phone call, without crying. Traffic moved around her. Street vendors walked between waiting vehicles. Life continued exactly as it always had. Only hers no longer belonged to the place she had helped build. The gift bag rested on the passenger seat. Every time she stopped at a traffic light, it tipped gently towards her, almost like it wanted to remind her that some people don't just end chapters, they decorate them. Before anyone called her former director, before boardroom votes and legal documents, Victoria was simply the daughter who showed up first. 22 years earlier, the family business was nothing more than a small wholesale provision shop with uneven wooden shelves and a handwritten ledger whose corners were repaired with clear tape so many times that nobody remembered its original color. Her father believed every business could survive hard times. Victoria believed every business survived because someone quietly kept everything together. During stock season, she rarely went home. She slept on a narrow folding camp bed in the back office with a small rechargeable fan beside her and a thick notebook tucked beneath her pillow. If she woke up at 2 in the morning remembering a supplier who needed payment, she wrote it down. If she remembered a customer whose daughter had just started university, she wrote that down too. People thought she was recording numbers. She was actually recording relationships. She knew which supplier had a son preparing for medical school, which transporter preferred early morning collections, which retailer struggled every August when school fees were due. When someone fell behind on payments, Victoria called before sending reminders, not to demand money, but to ask if everything was all right. That simple habit earned something no contract could guarantee: trust. As the years passed, the little provision shop became a respected regional distribution company. The warehouse grew larger, the delivery fleet expanded, the offices became modern. People praised the family name. Very few realized that behind every smooth operation stood one woman with dozens of notebooks, supplier birthdays, children's graduations, preferred payment schedules, harvest seasons, road conditions during the rainy months, which retailer always paid late but always paid, which customer should never be embarrassed in front of others because pride mattered more than profit. To outsiders, they were ordinary notebooks. To Victoria, they were the business. Her brothers had different responsibilities. Anthony, the eldest, loved public events, ribbon cuttings, newspaper interviews, business association dinners. He believed visibility created success. David, the youngest, enjoyed expansion, new buildings, new vehicles, modern offices. Whenever profits increased, David wanted another project. Victoria never argued. She simply asked one question.
Can we sustain it?
Sometimes they listened, sometimes they didn't. Whenever they ignored her, months later they quietly discovered she had been right. She never reminded them. She simply solved the next problem. Her father noticed everything, especially the things nobody applauded. One evening, after the warehouse closed, he found Victoria checking inventory alone. "You've been here since 6 this morning," he said. She smiled without looking up. "The inventory won't count itself." He leaned against the doorway.
When did you last take a holiday?
I don't remember.
"You should. There'll be time." He looked at her for a long moment, then said quietly,
Never let this business become your whole identity.
I helped build it, Papa.
I know. But businesses outlive buildings.
She paused.
They also outlive people.
Those words settled somewhere deep inside her. At the time, she thought he was talking about retirement. He wasn't.
Meanwhile, something invisible had begun changing inside the family. It didn't happen in one meeting or one argument. It happened the way cracks form beneath paint, quietly, slowly, almost politely. Anthony began introducing Victoria differently. Instead of saying, "This is my sister, she runs operations," he started saying simply, "This is Victoria." Nothing more. Board meetings gradually moved to afternoons. She wasn't told. Important supplier lunches happened while she was visiting warehouses. Nobody deliberately excluded her. They simply stopped including her. When she asked for reports, someone would say, "Oh, we thought David had already sent them." When she suggested improvements, Anthony would smile and say, "We'll think about it." Sometimes they did. Often they presented the exact same idea weeks later as though it had just been discovered. Victoria noticed. She also noticed something else. The staff still came to her first, not because of hierarchy, but because they trusted her judgment. Drivers called Victoria before calling management. Warehouse supervisors sought her approval before making expensive decisions. Even customers sometimes asked, "Can we wait until Madame Victoria returns?" Anthony smiled whenever he heard those questions, but his smile never quite reached his eyes. Then came the annual Suppliers Appreciation Dinner. Nearly 300 guests filled the ballroom. For years, Anthony had delivered the keynote speech, and that evening was no different. He spoke confidently about growth, expansion, vision, the future. The applause was generous. Then the event host stepped back onto the stage.
We have one final recognition tonight.
Anthony adjusted his jacket, certain his name would be called. Instead, the chairman of the Suppliers Association walked to the microphone and smiled towards Victoria. "We would like to recognize someone whose integrity has quietly strengthened every business represented in this room. This award isn't for the biggest salesperson. It isn't for the loudest executive. It's for the person who always answers the phone even after office hours, the person whose word has never once failed us." He looked directly at Victoria.
Mrs. Victoria Nadi.
For a second, she didn't move. Then the applause rose slowly and completely filled the room. People stood, one after another. Suppliers, retailers, drivers, warehouse owners, even competitors. Victoria accepted the crystal plaque with both hands, looking almost embarrassed.
Thank you. I only kept the promises our company made.
The applause became even louder. Across the ballroom, Anthony clapped too. His smile was perfect. His eyes were not. That night, for the first time, he realized something he had never considered before. People weren't loyal to the company first. They were loyal to Victoria. And from that evening onward, he quietly began asking himself a dangerous question. If the business could not afford to lose her, what would happen if one day she no longer belonged to it? Some betrayals don't begin in a boardroom. They begin in small conversations you were never invited to. There are moments that divide a family's history into two parts, before and after. For Victoria, that moment wasn't the boardroom meeting. It was the day her father's office chair remained empty. It started with what everyone believed would be a routine medical checkup.
Just a few days of rest.
He told the staff with his usual smile. He even joked with the warehouse workers before leaving.
Don't let Victoria work herself into another overnight shift.
Everyone laughed. Victoria did too. She didn't know those would be the last instructions she would ever receive from her father. Within weeks, the checkup became surgery. The surgery became complications. The complications became long afternoons spent in hospital corridors, where coffee grew cold before anyone remembered to drink it. The business continued, because it had to. Anthony chaired meetings, David handled expansion, Victoria quietly held everything together. She visited the hospital every evening with updated reports, not because her father demanded them, but because she knew they comforted him. He still wanted to know if suppliers had been paid, if deliveries were on time, if the Christmas inventory had arrived safely. Even from a hospital bed, his first concern was always the people whose livelihoods depended on the company. One evening, after everyone else had left the room, he reached for Victoria's hand. "You look tired," she smiled. "I've looked tired for 20 years. He laughed softly, then became serious. "Promise me something. Anything. If this family ever forgets that people built this business, don't you forget." She nodded. "I promise." He squeezed her hand gently. "Good." Those were the last complete sentences they ever shared. 3 days later, the founder of the company was gone. Grief changes people, sometimes by making them kinder, sometimes by revealing who they already were. The funeral drew hundreds: customers, suppliers, competitors, former employees, drivers who had retired years earlier. Many stood in line for hours simply to pay their respects. Again and again, people approached Victoria. "I'm so sorry. Your father always spoke proudly of you. I don't know how this company would have survived without your hard work." Anthony heard every one of those conversations. Each compliment landed like a pebble inside his shoe, small but impossible to ignore. After the mourning period ended, the family gathered to discuss the future. The lawyer explained the ownership structure, the shares, the succession documents. Everything had been prepared properly. Anthony would become executive chairman, David would oversee business development, Victoria would remain director of operations. It sounded fair. Everyone agreed. On paper, nothing had changed. In reality, everything had. The first 6 months passed quietly, too quietly. Meetings became shorter, conversations became longer, but only after Victoria had left the room. When she entered, voices stopped. Someone closed a laptop. Someone folded a document before she could read it. Whenever she asked, "Did I miss something?" Anthony always smiled. Nothing important. She believed him, at first. Then came Evelyn, Anthony's wife. She had never worked in the business. She rarely visited the warehouse. She couldn't tell one supplier from another. But after the funeral, she began attending family strategy meetings. Not officially, just sitting quietly, listening, offering fresh perspectives.
We should modernize the leadership.
The company needs younger energy.
Businesses can't depend on one person.
Anthony agreed. David nodded. Victoria kept reviewing supplier contracts. She assumed those conversations weren't really about her, until they were. Months passed. The changes became harder to ignore. Departments that reported to her for years suddenly reported elsewhere. Her signature was removed from certain approvals. The finance manager stopped copying her into weekly reports. New software was introduced without consulting the person who actually supervised daily operations. Whenever she questioned anything, the answer sounded reasonable. We're just restructuring. We're improving efficiency. We're sharing responsibilities. Nothing dramatic, nothing anyone could point to as betrayal. Just one responsibility after another, quietly disappearing. One afternoon, she noticed something unusual. Samuel, the company's oldest warehouse supervisor, was waiting outside her office. He had worked beside her for 18 years, and he looked uncomfortable. "Madame, can I ask you something?" "Of course." He hesitated.
Are you leaving us?
She frowned. "What do you mean?"
The staff have been talking.
They said management is preparing for a transition. Victoria felt something shift inside her. "Who told you?" Samuel lowered his eyes. "I shouldn't say." She smiled gently. "You've never lied to me before." After a long silence, he answered quietly. "I heard it after one of the executive meetings. They said the company needs a different structure."
The staff have been talking.
Victoria thanked him. She didn't panic. She didn't confront anyone. She simply walked back into her office, closed the door, and sat in complete silence. For the first time, she allowed herself to ask a question she had spent months avoiding. What if this isn't restructuring? What if they're restructuring me? That evening, she didn't go home immediately. Instead, she walked through the warehouse, past the loading bays, past the forklifts, past shelves she had organized years earlier. She ran her fingers across cartons stacked with military precision. Every aisle held a memory. She remembered negotiating discounts that allowed those products to be stocked. She remembered sleeping on a camp bed during inventory season. She remembered teaching young staff members how to read damaged invoices by hand when computers failed. She remembered her father standing exactly where she was now. Trust is built one honest day at a time. Her eyes became moist, not because she feared losing her position, but because she feared losing the people. As she turned to leave, Samuel called after her. "Madame." She looked back. The old warehouse supervisor stood with his hands behind his back, his voice barely above a whisper. "Who's going to fix everything if you go?" Victoria looked around the warehouse one last time. The drivers loading trucks, the young clerk checking invoices, the cleaners sweeping the loading dock. People who had become family without sharing her surname. She smiled, the kind of smile that carried both gratitude and heartbreak. Someone will.
Some people don't fire you because you failed. They fire you because your success reminds them of their dependence on you. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday morning. Board of Directors meeting, 10 a.m., executive conference room. No agenda, no explanation. Victoria barely glanced at it. She assumed it was another quarterly strategy meeting. By then, she had stopped wondering why fewer documents crossed her desk. She had chosen peace over suspicion. If there was a problem, they would surely tell her. They were family. She arrived 10 minutes early, just as she always had. The conference room smelled faintly of polished wood and freshly brewed coffee. 6 chairs surrounded the long walnut table. Anthony sat at the head, David beside him. Evelyn was there too, although she wasn't a director. 2 external board members occupied the remaining seats, their expressions unusually stiff, almost apologetic. She greeted everyone warmly. "Good morning." Only one person answered immediately. The others forced polite smiles. She noticed a cream-colored gift bag sitting neatly in the middle of the table. Gold ribbon, white tissue paper, elegant. She smiled. Who's celebrating today? Nobody laughed. Anthony cleared his throat. Please have a seat. Something about his voice made the room feel smaller. The corporate secretary began reading prepared documents: corporate restructuring, leadership transition, operational realignment. The words sounded impressive, almost noble, but somehow they never mentioned the real subject, Victoria. Finally, Anthony folded his hands. As everyone knows, this company has entered a new phase. He spoke slowly, choosing every word. We appreciate everything you've contributed over the years. No one can question your commitment. David nodded. You've sacrificed more than anyone. Victoria smiled politely. Thank you. Anthony continued, which is exactly why we've made this decision. She frowned slightly. What decision? Silence. Long enough to hear the air conditioner. Long enough to hear someone's pen fall onto the table. Finally, Anthony looked directly into her eyes. The board has voted to restructure executive leadership. He slid a document toward her. Effective today, your position has been dissolved. The sentence landed softly, almost gently, which somehow made it hurt more. Victoria looked down, not because she was defeated, but because she wanted to make sure she had read it correctly. She turned the page, then another. No accusations, no misconduct, no poor performance, no financial losses, nothing. Only legal language explaining that her responsibilities had been redistributed. 22 years reduced to paperwork. She looked up calmly. I don't understand. Anthony leaned forward. It's not personal. The company simply needs a different direction. Victoria nodded once. And that direction doesn't include me? Nobody answered. Evelyn broke the silence. You've carried so much for so long, she smiled sympathetically. You deserve to rest. Rest? The word echoed inside Victoria's mind. Rest? She remembered sleeping beside inventory, driving through storms to rescue broken deliveries, missing birthdays, cancelling holidays, standing beside her father's hospital bed while still running the company. Rest? No, this wasn't rest. This was removal, wrapped in kindness. Anthony reached toward the elegant gift bag. He gently pushed it across the table. This is from all of us. Victoria stared at it. For several seconds, she didn't move. Then she slowly untied the ribbon, lifted the white tissue paper. Inside was a framed photograph of the entire family taken on the company's 20th anniversary. Beneath it, a crystal appreciation plaque in grateful recognition of your years of service. Under the plaque, an envelope. She already knew what it contained. Still, she opened it. Final settlement, benefits, confidentiality agreement, non-compete clauses, every page prepared long before that morning. This hadn't been decided today. It had been planned, carefully, quietly, weeks, perhaps months ago. The gift bag wasn't an afterthought. It was part of the performance. Victoria closed the envelope, folded the documents neatly, and placed them back inside. Then she looked around the room, not with anger, not with hatred, with disappointment. She said softly, I wish someone had trusted me enough to tell me the truth. Nobody spoke. The two independent directors lowered their eyes. David stared at the table. Anthony looked at the window. Only Evelyn maintained eye contact, still convinced they had handled everything gracefully. Victoria stood, smoothed the front of her jacket, picked up the gift bag. Then she surprised everyone. She smiled, a genuine, gentle smile. Thank you. Anthony blinked. For understanding? Victoria headed. No, for teaching me something. What? She looked at each of them. That a title can be taken. A salary can be stopped. A chair can be given to someone else. She rested one hand on the gift bag. But trust never sits in a boardroom. It lives inside people. For the first time that morning, Anthony felt uncomfortable. Not because of what she said, but because he suddenly realized she hadn't begged, she hadn't argued legally, she hadn't even cried. She simply accepted reality, the way people do when they know something you don't. Outside, the receptionist stood as Victoria approached, her eyes already red. "Madame, I just heard." Victoria smiled gently. "It's all right." "No," she whispered. "It isn't." Victoria reached across the desk and squeezed her hand. "Take care of yourself." One by one, employees noticed her walking toward the exit, carrying only the elegant gift bag and a small cardboard box. The warehouse supervisor stopped what he was doing. Drivers removed their caps. A cleaner quietly wiped away tears with the corner of her apron. No announcement had been made, yet somehow everyone understood. The woman who had remembered their children's names, helped pay hospital bills without telling anyone, stayed late whenever they struggled, was leaving, and none of them had been asked what they thought. As Victoria reached the front entrance, Samuel hurried after her, carrying one last file. "You forgot this." She looked at it. It was the old blue supplier notebook, the one she'd started using years ago. Every page filled in her handwriting. Names, promises, phone numbers, birthdays, payment histories, tiny observations no software could ever capture. Samuel said, "I thought they'd keep it. They said it wasn't needed anymore." Victoria held the notebook close to her chest. For the first time that day, her eyes filled with tears, not because she had lost the company, but because they truly believed the business had been stored inside filing cabinets. They had no idea it had always been carried inside relationships. She thanked Samuel, placed the notebook carefully into the cardboard box, then walked toward her car. The afternoon sun reflected off the company sign she had spent decades helping build. She looked at it one final time, not with bitterness, but with quiet gratitude. As she drove away, the gift bag tipped gently onto the passenger seat. She glanced at it briefly, then at the blue notebook beside it. One was filled with paper, the other with 22 years of trust. She didn't know yet which one would shape her future. But before 3 years had passed, the answer would become painfully clear to everyone she had just left behind. They believed they had taken away her future. They had only taken away her office. For the first week, Victoria did almost nothing, not because she had given up, but because for the first time in 22 years, there was nowhere she had to be. No delivery schedules, no supplier calls, no warehouse inspections, no board meetings. She woke up before dawn anyway, out of habit, made tea, opened her notebook, then quietly closed it again. The silence felt unfamiliar. She had spent so many years solving everyone else's problems, she no longer knew what to do with her own. One morning, while cleaning a drawer at home, she found the gift bag again. The gold ribbon was still tied neatly around the handle. She removed the appreciation plaque, looked at it for a long moment. In grateful recognition of your years of service. She smiled sadly, then folded the gift bag carefully, not out of sentiment, but out of principle. Some reminders deserve to be kept, not because they still hurt, but because they reveal how far you have traveled. She placed it in the bottom drawer of a small filing cabinet, closed it and never opened it again. For now. A month later, her phone rang. The caller ID read, Mr. Hassan Musa, one of the oldest suppliers the company had ever worked with, well into his 70s, a man whose words still carried more weight than many written contracts. Victoria, it's been too quiet. She laughed. I suppose retirement is quieter than I expected. He was silent for a moment, then asked gently, Are you truly retired? She looked out the window. No, I don't think I am. I didn't think so. Another pause. Come and have lunch with me. His office was nothing impressive. Old wooden furniture, a faded wall clock that ticked louder than necessary, stacks of invoices tied together with string. He poured 2 cups of tea himself. No assistant, no ceremony. After a few minutes, he asked, So, when are you starting again? Victoria smiled. Starting what? The business. She shook her head. I have no warehouse, no trucks, no capital, no office. Mr. Musa stirred his tea. You've forgotten something. What? You still have your name. She looked at him quietly. He leaned back. In 35 years of doing business, I've trusted buildings. They burned. I've trusted equipment. It broke. I've trusted markets. They changed. Then he smiled. But I have never regretted trusting honest people. He reached into his drawer, removed a supplier agreement and placed it in front of her. 30 days of credit. Victoria stared at the document. I can't ask you to take that risk. He chuckled. My dear, I'm not taking a risk. I've watched you pay invoices before they were due for 22 years. If I can't trust you, I shouldn't trust anyone. For the first time since leaving the company, Victoria cried. Not loudly, just enough for 2 tears to fall on the edge of the contract. 3 weeks later, she rented a modest warehouse on the edge of town. It wasn't impressive. The roof leaked whenever heavy rain came. The office had mismatched furniture. The sign outside was so small, most drivers passed it without noticing. Her first employee was a young logistics coordinator, Grace. Her second was Samuel, the old warehouse supervisor. He walked into the office carrying a small toolbox. Victoria was surprised. I thought you were still with the company. I was. What happened? He smiled. They said experience wasn't everything anymore. Victoria laughed softly. They told you that too? Samuel grinned. I suppose they did. She held out her hand. Welcome. He shook it. It feels good to be back where the work matters. Words spread quietly, not through advertising, not through billboards, but through conversations. One retailer mentioned to another, Victoria has started something new. A transporter told a supplier, if she's involved, deliver without worry. Former customers called simply to ask, where are you now? Some even apologized. We thought you had retired. Victoria never criticized her old company, never corrected anyone. She simply said, I'm working again. That was enough. Meanwhile, inside the family company, everything still looked successful. Anthony gave interviews, David announced another expansion project, the board celebrated record quarterly sales. Evelyn proudly told friends, the restructuring was difficult but necessary. No one noticed that something invisible had begun disappearing. Calls that had once been answered on the first ring now took days. Small retailers quietly moved elsewhere. Suppliers became strangely cautious. Nothing dramatic, nothing anyone could measure immediately, just tiny fractures, one relationship at a time. 6 months later, the finance director entered Anthony's office carrying a report. We've got a problem. Anthony barely looked up. What now? Our supplier discounts are shrinking. Renegotiate. We tried. They're refusing. Anthony frowned. Since when? The finance director hesitated. Since Victoria left. Anthony looked up sharply. That's ridiculous. It's not only the discounts. Several suppliers have reduced our credit period. Some now require partial payment before delivery. Anthony waved dismissively. They'll come around. But they didn't, because the discounts had never been based solely on volume. They had been built on years of promises that Victoria had always kept. Across town, her small warehouse was alive with activity. Grace organized dispatch schedules, Samuel supervised loading, Victoria walked the floor exactly as she always had, still greeting every driver by name, still calling customers personally after major deliveries, still remembering birthdays, still sending flowers when suppliers lost loved ones. Grace noticed everything. One evening, she asked, Madam, how do you remember all these people? Victoria smiled. I don't remember transactions. I remember lives. Grace looked around the warehouse. No wonder they followed you. Victoria shook her head. No, they didn't follow me. They followed trust. By the end of the second year, the small warehouse was too small. A second one opened, then a third. Not because Victoria wanted to become the biggest, but because demand kept arriving faster than she could serve it. She rejected shortcuts, refused dishonest contracts, paid staff fairly, introduced profit sharing for long-serving employees. When Grace asked why, Victoria answered simply, I know what it feels like to build something and not be treated like you belong. No one in her company ever forgot those words. Then, in the third year, everything changed. One phone call, one opportunity, one decision. And the family who had wrapped betrayal in gold ribbon would finally discover what they had really given away.
The greatest revenge is becoming the standard everyone else is measured against. By the beginning of the third year, Victoria no longer recognized the woman who had driven away from the family office with a cardboard box and a gift bag. Not because success had changed her, because peace had. She no longer woke up wondering who appreciated her. She woke up asking a different question. How many people can we help grow today? Her company wasn't the biggest, not yet, but it had become something far more valuable, predictable, reliable, trusted. Customers knew that if Victoria gave her word, they could build their own businesses around it. Then came the phone call. Grace hurried into Victoria's office holding her tablet. "Madam, I think you need to see this." Victoria looked up from a shipment schedule. "What is it?" Grace took a breath. "The National Cooperative Retail Network." Victoria's eyebrows lifted. The cooperative was one of the largest purchasing groups in the country. Winning its contract meant supplying hundreds of independent retailers. For years, the contract had belonged to the family business. Grace continued, "They've invited us to present." Victoria read the email twice, not because she couldn't believe it, but because she understood exactly what it meant. Someone, somewhere, had decided that her young company deserved to stand beside businesses that had existed for decades. She smiled. "Let's prepare." Across town, the same email arrived in Anthony's office. He barely looked at it. "We've supplied them for years." David grinned. "This will be straightforward." Evelyn laughed. "They're probably inviting smaller companies just to make the process look competitive." None of them noticed the finance director quietly looking uncomfortable. He had heard rumors. Retailers were talking. Suppliers were talking. Even transport companies were talking. One name kept appearing: Victoria. Presentation day arrived. The conference room overlooked the city skyline. Executives from the cooperative sat quietly listening as company after company explained why they deserved the contract. Anthony spoke first. His presentation was polished. Beautiful slides, confident delivery, growth projections, brand recognition. The applause was courteous. Then Victoria's turn came. She carried no dramatic presentation, no expensive animations, just a simple folder. The chairperson smiled. "Mrs. Victoria, what makes your company different?" She stood calmly. "Our competitors can tell you how much product they sell. I'd rather tell you how many promises we keep." The room became still. She continued, "When deliveries are delayed, our customers don't lose products. They lose trust with their own customers. When suppliers wait too long to be paid, their families wait too. We don't see invoices, we see people." One board member leaned forward. "And if demand doubles?" Victoria smiled. "We'll only accept what we can honor. I would rather disappoint someone with honesty today than deceive them tomorrow." The presentation lasted barely 15 minutes. There was no applause this time, only thoughtful silence. 1 week later, the decision was announced. The cooperative had chosen Victoria's company, not because she offered the lowest price, not because she was the biggest supplier, but because, according to the official statement, your company demonstrated the highest level of operational trust, supplier confidence, and long-term reliability. Grace read the email aloud. The warehouse erupted. Drivers cheered. Forklift operators applauded. Samuel quietly removed his cap and wiped away a tear. For a brief moment, she thought about her father. Trust is built one honest day at a time. He had been right all along. The news traveled quickly. Inside the family company, silence replaced confidence. Anthony stared at the announcement. He read it once, then again. Finally, he whispered, "How?" The finance director answered quietly. "They didn't choose a company. They chose the person." Nobody spoke because everyone knew he was right. Within months, the consequences became impossible to hide. Several major retailers transferred their accounts. More suppliers requested advance payment.
Cash flow tightened, expansion projects stalled, the impressive new headquarters suddenly felt too large. Meetings became tense, arguments replaced optimism. For the first time, Anthony began opening the old operational reports Victoria had written years ago. Every page carried the same careful handwriting, the same practical thinking, the same quiet wisdom he had once dismissed as ordinary. He closed the file. Too late. One rainy afternoon, Victoria's receptionist entered her office. "Madame, you have visitors." Anthony, David, and Evelyn. Standing together, the same three people who had once watched her leave with a gift bag. Victoria welcomed them warmly. "Please, come in." No bitterness, no sarcasm, only courtesy. They sat. For some uncomfortable seconds, nobody spoke. Finally, Anthony cleared his throat. "We've made mistakes." Victoria remained silent. He continued, "The business is struggling. We'd like to discuss a strategic partnership, not an apology, a proposal." Victoria noticed the difference. David finally spoke. "We're stronger together." She looked at them gently. "I believed that once." Silence filled the room. Anthony lowered his eyes. What would it take? Victoria folded her hands. "I won't return." The words were soft, certain. "But," she continued, "I'm willing to supply your company if..." The room became still. "If you agree to fair payment terms, if every agreement is written clearly, if no employee is ever treated as disposable, and if every supplier is treated with the same respect you expect from them." Anthony looked at her. For the first time in years, he wasn't looking at his younger sister. He was looking at a leader, one he had failed to recognize when she sat beside him every day. He nodded slowly. "We can agree to that." Victoria smiled. "I hope you do. Not for me, for your business, because trust is expensive to rebuild." 6 months later, construction began on Victoria's largest warehouse yet. The opening ceremony was simple. No celebrities, no lavish decorations, just employees, suppliers, customers, families, people who built the company together. Before cutting the ribbon, she invited Samuel to stand beside her, then Grace, then Mr. Hassan Musa. "This building," she said, "belongs to every person who kept believing when all I had was my word." The applause lasted a long time. That evening, after everyone had gone home, Victoria sat alone in her new office. She opened the bottom drawer of her desk. Inside lay the old cream gift bag. The gold ribbon was slightly faded now. The tissue paper had yellowed with age. She smiled, not because it no longer mattered, but because it no longer hurt. She folded it carefully once more, placed it back into the drawer, and closed it. Some reminders are worth keeping, not to remember the betrayal, but to remember the distance between who you were and who you chose to become. Some families confuse access with ownership. They believe that because someone works quietly, they can also be removed quietly. But the quietest people are often carrying the heaviest responsibilities. You can replace a title, you can replace an office, you can even replace a name on the company door, but you cannot replace the trust that someone has spent decades earning. Because trust doesn't belong to buildings, it belongs to people. And when people take it with them, the real value leaves too. If Victoria's journey reminded you that integrity is never wasted, even when it goes unnoticed, leave a comment with just one word: trust. And if you believe every quiet sacrifice deserves its own payoff, stay close. This is where those stories live.